Welcome to the Madness and Grace podcast, where we explore the connection between mental health and faith. I'm Dr. Matthew Stanford, neuroscientist, author, and mental health advocate.
And I'm Dr. Madeline Stiers, therapist and trauma researcher. We're so glad you're joining us today. Each week, we have authentic conversations about personal stories, we share professional insights, and explore the meaningful ways faith can influence mental well-being.
Whether you're seeking comfort, understanding, or simply a new perspective, we're here to journey with you. Thanks for tuning in. Now let's dive into today's conversation. Hello and welcome to another episode of Madness and Grace. I'm Matt Stanford, and with me is Dr. Madeline Stiers, my co-host. Hi, Maddie. How are you doing today?
How are you?
I'm doing well. I got an interesting topic today. A lot of you out there probably don't know how we even come up with these topics or what this interaction is like, but just to give you an idea of how Maddie and I go about doing this is we come up with a set of topics that either people have been asking for or that are interest in the news or that we're seeing out in the community in relationship to the mental health work we do. And then we don't talk about them before we sit down here and have this conversation. We each kind of prepare independently. And then this really is just a conversation between two mental health care providers on these topics of the day. So today is one that I was really interested in doing, Doomscrolling and News Fatigue, because I'm seeing obviously it more and more and more. It's been, something that's been developing over the last several decades because technology changing. But I'm really seeing it as a significant contributor to mental health problems that we're seeing in the general population. But also I see it as not just something that kind of generates mental health problems, but something that causes underlying mental health problems that already exist to be exacerbated. And you see that quite a bit. So I want to talk about that. So what am I talking about when I say doom scrolling? Or news fatigue. That's another thing that we've mentioned today. So this is this idea of kind of endlessly consuming news, endlessly consuming negative views. This is sitting up late night. So you wake up in the middle of the night and you just, you start scrolling through your social media, and it's just like negative news story after negative news story or conspiracy theory after conspiracy theory. And there's just nothing positive. And one of the things that I think we have to recognize that, frankly, a lot of people, particularly older individuals, don't realize in the context of social media. And we also would be talking about kind of 24-hour-a-day news cycles that exist on cable news. But I think what a lot of people don't understand is that there are algorithms built into social media that, it's not just what you look at, it's how long you look at something, it's how long you take to scroll past something. And so these algorithms build up what it thinks you want to see. And so it's going to feed you. If you look at a negative news story, it's going to feed you another negative news story in that same vein. And then if you look at that one, it feeds you more and more and more. And so at some point you feel like every single thing you see is this negative, some conspiracy of some shadow government that's going to destroy you and your family or whatever. And that's pretty disturbing, particularly since your brain is set up to look at the environment around you and perceive threat so that it can keep you safe. And so what happens is we get this massive stress response. So Maddie, as someone from another generation than me, how do you see this doom scrolling and news fatigue in the culture?
Yeah, I kind of think of them as obviously connected, but two separate things that go on. A lot of people use the term doom scrolling, not just in like the consumption of negative news or catastrophic news, those sorts of things. But really, people will get into bed, and we talk about this in the mental health sense. It's not good for you to be on devices right before bedtime. It activates part of your brain that, prevents you from getting good rest. People will get into bed, and I think past generations might have gotten into bed and read for a bit and then gone to sleep, read a book, an actual paper book. Right. Now people get into bed and they sit on their phone and 10, 15 minutes, okay, fine, like whatever, that's the world that we live in. I understand that. But people will be scrolling through. It has become so easy. And the way that social media captures our attention and our focus is these clips are, it takes you 5 seconds to read or the 10-second clip, and then you're on to the next one. And it kind of drags you into this consumer mindset of I want to continue to
more and
consume
more and more.
more and more and more. And so whether it's something negative that the algorithm has picked up, this catastrophic news about the world ending and blah, 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 or you're watching videos about how to make sourdough or homesteading. It doesn't matter. It's not
kind of mindless.
Scrolling. It's just doom scrolling. And then you find yourself awake at 2 a.m. and you haven't gone to sleep. And then you still have to get up at the same time the next day, which impacts your overall health. I mean, it just becomes this kind of big thing. And if the content that you're consuming is more negative, obviously that's likely to have a larger negative impact on your overall well-being. But really just overuse of technology and these apps don't bode for great sleep if you're in bed.
Right. Yeah, just the screen, the wavelength of the screen alone, regardless of what you're watching on it, it's a blue light, that frequency for blue light, and it activates your cortex. It makes it less likely you'll go to sleep. It's
such an interesting, concept for me when I think about how the news has evolved into not necessarily just a reporting avenue. It's
entertainment.
It's entertainment. It's intended to catch your attention like a drama. I get, some things are more interesting than others, but it becomes, bad news. Like these are all the things you need to be worried and concerned about.
Right.
And really our brains are designed and have evolved to be on the lookout for potential danger.
Absolutely. And they play off of that.
And so the reason I think people are likely falling into this like consumption of catastrophic news or these, conspiracy theories is because what's going to happen? Are we in danger? And it's not that you're just this weird person that has these weird beliefs and, maybe that's true in some cases, but really you're trying to protect yourself. You're trying to protect your family.
Yeah.
And so you're consuming and consuming and consuming, and what's true and what's not, I don't think most people have the training or education to really kind of dig deep into these news sources and determine if they're valid and reliable.
I would question that. I question that now. I question that now because of what you said at the beginning, and that's the way news is presented to us, how it's evolved. I don't know that most people have the ability anymore to be able, again, algorithms have a lot to do with this, but have the ability to sit down and kind of critically evaluate a story. And because you're fighting against the current to try to get information. I remember my father was a ferocious reader. And so my father would, every morning he'd go out and get the newspaper, if you remember what those were. And, out on the driveway, hey, Matt, go out and get my newspaper, and so he would read the newspaper from front to back, but, it would take him, it wouldn't be done in just an hour. He would read it all, and so, and then he would, and then we would watch the news at night. Like the news just came on at night. This is back in the day where there were 3 channels and they were all free, right? So, and I always used to tell my students when we were talking about this, in the old days, national news was a half-hour program that came on at like 5:30 in the evening, and that was it.
Yeah.
That was it. So you got Walter Cronkite at 5:30, and he was going to tell you everything you needed to know about the world in half an hour. And so think about what we get now, which is this 24 hours a day. And you make a really good point, is that, this idea that, our brain is set up to perceive threat, to protect us, our families, and kind of so we can make it through the world. Now, we certainly perceive positive things too, but we don't respond to that in the same way. We don't have a stress response that kind of generates us to action. Okay. So I want you to just think for a moment, with like right now, we've got all these 24-hour-a-day news cycles going out there. Let's just get off of social media for a while, because these existed even before social media did. Is there one where all they do is show positive stories 24 hours a day? No. Have you ever thought about why that is? Because no one would watch it. I know that sounds horrible, but you would watch it occasionally.
Right. When you
But
needed to feel better from all of the negative
you
news.
wouldn't watch it constantly. So, the kind of joke that's out there is that, you walk into the retirement community and, everybody's sitting in their living room with, Fox News turned all the way up, and they just keep it on all day long. And, it's kind of this stereotype kind of a joke that people make. But the reality is that's true for a lot of people. They keep these 24, be it MSNBC or Fox or CNN or whatever, it doesn't matter. But they keep them on because they're on 24 hours a day. And if you watch any of them, within 45 minutes of watching them, a thing will pop up at the bottom or across the top that will say something along the lines of, here's a breakout update, or, it's an emergency. It's like, it presents it as if it's some kind of there's a tornado coming kind of a thing. And then it's just a story that they've already told you about. They're just repeating it again. And all it's doing is it's generating this kind of threat response in people, and it makes them want to watch more. Now, you have to remember, and this is what I try to remind people all the time, the reality is, I think we always like to imagine that a news outlet or even social media is really there to inform us, that's their goal, is to inform us. Their goal is to make money.
Right.
And you have to remember that. And how do you make money? You make money through ads. That's how you make money. You don't make money through the content that you present. You make money through ads. So you have to get people to watch as much as possible, because you're going to go out to people that want to buy ads, and you're going to say, we're going to have every person in the world named Maddie watching. You know what I'm saying? And that's who you sell to, kind of a thing. And so that's what it's all about. And so what's the best way to get people to watch constantly? Threat response. And so if at this point, if you're out there listening and you're thinking, wait a minute, is he saying we're being manipulated? Heck yeah, you are. Absolutely. Me too. We're all being manipulated, and so I'm not saying I'm not arguing like manipulated for one political party or the other, or one religious belief. No, I'm just talking about manipulation for marketing. And so, we could have a news station that's 24 hours a day that leans to the left. We could have a news station that 24 hours a day that leans to the right, and they both could just present threat all day long, and they're both making money. And so that's what it's about.
Well, it's interesting. When I watch the news, I watch a variety of sources, because I like to see the leanings. And there's some that will say, we try to stay in the center and really
Absolutely.
Just
unbiased
news. Yeah. And it's still, you can hear the bias, because the reporters have their own beliefs.
Absolutely.
And, when you live in a world that, like we do, where everything is so polarized, it's almost hard to deliver straight news without talking about the polarization. And so, it's just really interesting if you can take a step back and consume news with a critical ear, understanding that while it's supposed to be unbiased, it is biased, and educating yourself to listen to both sides, I think, can be super helping, and right. Trying not to fall into that fear-based response is extremely helpful, because really it's not only bad for your mental health and your stress levels. Consuming negative news does increase your stress. Right. It's bad for your physical health. Like we talked about, the sleep potential that this can have on you. Oftentimes we are consuming, we talk about doom scrolling. We're not talking about computers. Usually it's your phone. Right. Most of our media consumption comes from our phones. And so it has negative physical effects of you. Our hands, people are getting arthritis in their thumbs earlier and younger, because, how do you scroll? You scroll with your thumb, and then your pinky, because if you have a phone that you rest on your pinky phone, people are noticing pain in and arthritis in their joints just like earlier because of that.
Carpal tunnel from from typing. It's the same kind of thing. So.
And your neck, the kind of bump on the back of people's necks much more frequently, having your neck curvature forward as opposed to back. People's heads are resting forward as opposed to the back. And then, so that's the physical aspect. I'm sure there's much more to that. You're not as active because you're zoned in on devices, but our worldview changes. When we are consuming something consistently negative, the way we view the world can be shifted from something, that it was previously to this, influence that we're getting from social media. And it can place a more negative lens on our worldview. It can impact our religious and spiritual beliefs in a way that can feel maybe more jaded, and where we used to get life, sustenance, joy from our religious and spiritual beliefs. It can really become this, well, why is this happening in the world? Why did God let this happen? Questioning, we've talked about in another episode, is fine, but when you're constantly feeling this negative weight in the world, and that plays into how you are experiencing your relationship with God and your spirituality, it's not a questioning because you're analyzing and deconstructing. It is a negative impact because of worldly evils, essentially.
Right. Yeah, when the focus is on all the negativity, and again, you may say to yourself out there listening, well, I don't just watch negative. I mean, I would honestly just challenge you, the next time you spend an hour, which we do all the time, going through your social media, or an hour with the news on, just take a piece of paper and make a mark every time you see a story that's negative versus every time you see a story that's positive. I think you'd be shocked. Okay.
Yeah.
But I think you make a good point. I mean, what's happening is people are getting a real sense of helplessness and despair, and that really is undermining kind of their faith. And I see that a lot of this has worked its way into the churches because there's much less, sadly, of an understanding of what the separation is between, say, politics and religion, and daily life and religion and things like that. I think people, they kind of try to figure out, they've lost their sense of foundation or grounding because they're just absolutely overwhelmed by the amount of negativity. I mean, within the Christian tradition, I mean, we understand that, and, it kind of shocks people sometimes when someone actually says it out loud, is that we live in a fallen world that is, by definition, evil and sinful. So when we see people suffer and we see horrible things happen and get that sense of being overwhelmed by what's going on around us, that's to be expected. And so we shouldn't be shocked by it. I mean, that's the whole point of needing a redeemer and a restoration. I mean, Paul writes that all of creation cries out to be redeemed. The literal physical creation cries out for that because it's so broken by sin. And so, I think that that's kind of what churches need to really begin to kind of help people understand that, there's a real difference between being informed and being immersed in information. And I see that even, and you made a really good point early on, and that is, how much can you know about making sourdough bread? Do you know what I mean? So it's like, how much time are you going to spend looking at sourdough recipes? And the way the information's being fed to us is that you will find yourself hours into this when you only were going to do it for 10 minutes. And there's nothing wrong with learning about making sourdough bread really well.
Or watching the news.
There's nothing wrong with that. But it's just the immersion where it just fills you and takes over everything. I mean, think about, like yesterday, I mean, just, I'm a new grandfather. So yesterday I got to spend time with my grandson, who's 4 months old and the cutest child in all the world. And so, but the thing is that, I got to spend hours with him. How could I imagine spending an hour on social media when I could spend that hour with him, And so, and that's how we got to get back to that, in the past, it was just how it was because these things weren't available to us. But I think, one of the main things we're trying to get people to understand here is the reason that you are drawn to these is not so much because while it's being presented to you that you want to be informed and you need to know about these things, it really is because of a threat And so your mind is perceiving threat, and you're having a threat response, a stress response, and you want to get back to that so you somehow can fix it. But the reality is, there's a war going on in the Ukraine. That's a horrible thing. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
People are dying. It's a terrible thing. Okay. There's nothing you can do about it.
Knowing that it's happening and understanding what's going on is absolutely encouraged.
So nothing wrong with that.
Watching 7 hours of videos of people's homes being blown up is going to do damage to you.
Right. The nuances of the political intrigue that's going on, of why this started and how it's going to stop and who's involved, ultimately are meaningless in your daily life. And I'm not saying that the event is not meaningless and that doesn't shape what goes on in the world. I'm just saying that there's nothing that you can do about it. And the more you know about it still means there's nothing you can do about it. But like you said, it's going to damage you if you allow it to overtake who you are. And that's really what's happening here. I mean, it doesn't have to be the news. It could be anything. If you get
we're a consumer society. This is just one thing that we're talking, one area of consumption that we're discussing.
It's just because it's in our face. And the other thing that really concerns me is that it's in the face of our young people, in the face of our children, and so I see even my son, my youngest son is 20 now, he's in college, and he comes to me and he says, "What's up with this? I see this showing up a lot on my social media, and it's like, it might be some little nuanced little thing, but it's just, because he looked at one little news article on it, now it's just permeating everything that's showing up." And so we're kind of getting guided. And again, I'm not thinking that's not in some malevolent kind of, someone's out there trying to convince you how to think. I mean, I'm sure there are people, but that's not what I'm concerned about. It's all around threat. And again, I want you to just ask yourself, why is there no news station that's ever existed that gave you 24-hour-a-day positive stories? I mean, I can promise you there's 24-hour-a-day positive stories. There's no doubt.
Because people wouldn't watch it as regular, and they wouldn't make money.
It wouldn't make money. I mean, that's it. Because there is no stress response if you show beautiful pictures of guys on hikes in the Grand Canyon.
Yeah.
And so
the other side of this is, really you kind of think of this as a spectrum. Like overconsumption is what we're talking about. On the far end of that is avoidance, and people are avoiding, which leads to
isolation,
and just kind of general ignorance into what's going on in the world. And we can know what's going on in the world, so knowing is important, Right. But really what we're trying to get to is informed engagement, like engaging with critical thought in a variety of ways that doesn't overtake your life and your stress response, and it doesn't push that to avoidance, right? Like I don't want to know anything about the news. I don't want to know anything about politics, because maybe I overconsumed, and now the second I watch something, my stress response spikes. So I'm totally avoiding now, which leads to, so many different things that aren't necessarily beneficial for just our society, but also just individuals. It's
being informed isn't a bad thing. That's not what we're saying at all. I think, I'll just say what I do, how do I deal with it? And maybe if you're willing, you'll share how you deal with it. You avoid everything. No, I don't know. So what I do is, I recognize, what these things, for number one, I don't like to watch news programs. I think that news programs are primarily set up for entertainment, and you can see that just from the way they're presented. I like to read my news, and so I start out each morning I have a number of different online sources that I go to, and I think that's the number one thing. I go to multiple sources, and I'll read the top stories of the day. I try not to dig in too much, like get it down a rabbit trail, but I read the top stories of the day. What I like to do also is I like to have a couple of options that I know lean one way and I know lean the other way. And so one of the things I always like to do is like, what's the headline, what is the number one headline that they're pushing on this left-leaning site versus the right-leaning site? And they're almost never the same headline, which I always find kind of fascinating. But I like to read my news. And then if I find a story that I find particularly troubling or I'm really interested in, then I'll really dig into it, and so and that'll be, just that one story, not some. So I'll go try to look up the original references or stuff like that. But I really don't spend that much time. I want to get some information in the morning to start my day, and then I move on. I mean, I move on to what I do. And so, I think that, like for me, if I'm reading a story about, let's say they say, some new drug will, help you lose 1,000 pounds in, 10 minutes or whatever, some ridiculous thing. Well, as a scientist, I'm fascinated by anything scientific. And so I will go and find the original study that showed that. And I want to read that. And then I'm always fascinated by how poorly they've summarized it. But I think that, finding the information, I think that's but I love to read my news. But again,
Yeah.
I won't spend even a half an hour a day reading news.
Yeah,
What
I
do
do
you
the
do?
same. In the morning, I listen to, it's like a 15-minute little clip on NPR that they kind of summarize some things, and I'll listen to that in the car as I'm getting ready in the morning. But for the most part, I do just read my news online as well. And I don't do it every day. Some days I'm
Right.
too
I
tired.
don't do it on the weekends.
Like,
No
I'm
weekends.
not going to engage in that. Like, that's not it's not how I
No.
want to start my day today. So I do very similar to what you just said. For the doom scrolling, I think that you and I have a unique positioning in this because we are very aware of how bad it is for us. It's something we're on a podcast talking about currently. It's a part of our kind of bailiwick and what we
see
do.
it a lot in our clients. We see it damage
Yeah.
them.
So I'm very mindful about my media consumption and what that is time-wise. But I also I'm very mindful of the algorithm, which you said earlier, like you think maybe older generations aren't as aware of how quickly this algorithm, whether they know it exists, but actually how quickly. So I would challenge anybody who's listening, who's going, what is this algorithm? Go look up something on a social media platform that you don't ever watch. Like look up, I don't know, whale noises or something. Go watch
weird
videos of that and then go back to like your homepage and start scrolling again.
Right.
And ultimately they'll start showing you some
it's
of
disturbing.
Like whales will start popping up in your feed. I mean, it's wild. If you do it on your computer and your computer's connected to your phone, that will happen. I used here at work on my work computer, I used Scribe, which is like a platform that you can use to kind of capture a real quick video of how you're doing something to train people. I used that yesterday. Last night I went home on my phone looking at something and I'm getting ads for this. And I'm going, wow, it's wild. It's so quick. So I pay attention to things like that and I'm mindful of it. And I will intentionally work to switch my algorithm if I have found that it's gotten too much of something that I'm not finding helpful or meaningful or it's stressing me out. I'll switch that, I'll change it. I'll look up, videos of something that I find entertaining that is kind of mundane, like sourdough making or I don't know, cat videos, whatever it may be. So that's how I intentionally like manage my algorithm because you can change it, you can shift it. But you have to be aware that it's happening to be able to navigate that. It's interesting. Right. I also read books. And this is a weird pet peeve of mine, but people will be like, this generation, the younger generations, I guess, will say, yeah, I read, 10 books this year. Great. I'm like, did you read it or did you listen to it?
Right.
And they're like,
that's different. Yeah, very different.
And I have had this conversation with many people because, it's read. And I go, no. Reading is the act of looking at words on a paper or a device and your brain recognizing those words visually and taking that, and there's reading comprehension that happens along with that. Listen to books. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm not saying there isn't. But reading, as opposed to just scrolling, it's good for us. It's good for you.
Absolutely. No, it makes a huge difference. And I mean, the thing about reading is that it, you hear it in your voice. As you're reading it, it brings up memories about, that you'd had that are related. And then it causes you to also imagine what this is being described to you. So if it describes a World War II battle, then you're going to try to pull that together in your head of what that looks like. So there's a lot of cognitive, kind of activity that's going on that you don't get when you're necessarily listening, because there are things that are taken out when you listen because it's not your voice. You might have background noises. Sometimes like when they do it, like they'll add in like background noises of like a battle or something. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's just not the same. I'd rather you listen to it than not, but it's not the same. And
Well, and that
also
rest
the other,
that get by sitting down and reading. I mean, I know I listen to audiobooks, so I'm
it's
not
it's
knocking 'em,
relaxing.
but I'm doing the dishes. I'm running around vacuuming when I'm listening
Right.
to an audiobook. I'm not taking a rest. My body is not taking a break, a physical break. And I think there's something to be said about
The
that.
other thing is that, people have to remember, we talked about being informed versus being immersed. And that is, there are books out there that aren't just nonfiction. I know people are shocked by that, but because that's where the big money is in nonfiction books and novels and things like that. People are more interested in reading the Da Vinci Code than they are in reading things that are actually about, say, the history of the early Christian church, and so, but the thing is that, when you're reading books that are nonfiction, you're actually informing yourself and making it more likely that you can critically analyze information that's given to you now. So, like my father, I'll give an example. My father, like I said, he read the news every day, and then, barely watched any, media related to the news because of the generation he was from. But he was a ferocious reader of nonfiction books about battles and Texas history, but like World War II battles or Korea or things like that, and then World War II history. I'm sorry, and Texas history. So, I mean, he knew everything there was to know about Texas history and all this kind of stuff. So if somebody was going to throw something out about the history of Texas or World War II or World War I, my father would have a reservoir of knowledge that he could evaluate that with. And so I think that we've lost that quite a bit. We probably have a phone with you right now. Mine's sitting over here on my desk. You have access within a moment to all the information that's ever existed in all the world instantly. Yet we are no smarter. And so that's the sad thing. In fact, I would say that we're less able to critically evaluate. And that's really where these things come in. I mean, we get caught up, and I get caught up. I mean, you put me in front of a 24-hour news cycle that's just running in front of me. I mean, you won't be 3-4 stories into it before you're starting to notice a stress response because you're like, they're doing what? What's going on? This happened. What do I got to do to stop that? I mean, that's kind of what's going on in your subconscious.
Yeah. Learning to manage your emotional responses in response to what you're watching and hearing is challenging. And people have a hard time managing their emotional responses in their own day-to-day lives and other areas. So why would the news be any different?
I think churches have a huge role to play in this too, though, of really helping people understand kind of, a real hope, but that's grounded in God's sovereignty. As opposed to like we're just kind of being washed along in some river somewhere that, if you know everything there is to know about politics, where does that stand in the context of importance versus, people being in a relationship with the Lord, growing in your spiritual life, raising your family well, treating others kindly. I mean, the things that we're called to do, it really doesn't. And so, I think that we really, churches have to be more intentional in that, really helping people understand how to separate what's important from what's being thrown at us. Again, don't get us wrong. We're not saying it's not important for you to be informed. It's important for you to be informed in a healthy way. And the way these platforms are set up, they are, as we've said, they are working on certain neurological responses that you have. And those neurological responses, when continually activated, are physically and mentally unhealthy for you. So are we seeing increases in anxiety in the culture? Absolutely. Are we seeing increases in depression? Absolutely. Are we seeing increases in substance use? Absolutely. And there's no doubt, and the data, supports this, that these are contributing factors to that. They're not the only factor, but they are contributing factors. And if you have, or your family member or your loved one has an underlying mental health problem, be it have been diagnosed or not, these make it worse.
Yeah.
And we see that all the time. Would you not say that, Dr. Stiers? We have people come in and they are just trapped in these conspiracy theories and negativity and isolation because of their mental health problems have separated them from support. And this is where they get all their information.
Yeah. I think mental illness or not, the kind of isolation that you just mentioned that is the result of this doom scrolling or existential dread that occurs from the news sources is polarizing. I mean, because you have immersed yourself so deeply in one way of consuming news that anyone who says, oh, well, have you thought about it this way? And that's usually not as politely as that.
Right.
It becomes a challenge. People challenge each other and it not in a conversation. It becomes argumentative. Right. You start to lose relationships because having such strong beliefs that maybe weren't critically thought about or not being open to the other side because of that fear response, I think can really be damaging, not just to your mental health, but your relationships, which we know are all connected. So, yeah, I mean, I would say something to think about when we're talking about doom scrolling and consuming media and social media and news is put your phone down, walk away, even if it's work that's pulling you back to your devices. My first suggestion would be easiest thing to do is learn to live without your phone. And I don't mean throw it into the river and walk away from it forever, but get away from it, turn it off, spend time with your friends, spend time with your family, go take a walk outside.
Right.
And even if you're in Houston, there's some beautiful parks that you can get to where you can pretend like you're not in the middle of a giant city. Step away from it, And
the same would go for TV, for news on
absolutely.
TV.
I'm not saying put your phone down and go watch TV. No, go do things.
Right. I've seen people do that. I've seen people literally do that. Oh, I'm taking a break. I'm taking a break,
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. We talk about screen time with kids, but we don't limit ourselves as adults, an hour a day for screen time.
How often do we see parents that come in and their kids are really struggling with it? And they're like, oh, well, I don't let them use their phone once they get home from school, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, do you?
Yeah.
And you're just sitting there right in front of them doing it. So, the rules have to apply to everybody.
But yeah, so I would say, if you're questioning, how do I get away from this? Just put your phone down.
Absolutely. Just take a break. You don't
have to dive into all this reading or critically analyzing the news that we're talking about or even changing your algorithm. Great options. But if you're overwhelmed, put your phone down, walk away, go outside, talk to someone.
Go have a conversation with somebody about something pleasant.
Go read a novel that's not related to anything real. Go find some joy in other things. So,
well, as we close, I just would say, we have an upcoming episode that we'll be doing on how people are really unable to have conversations anymore about things they disagree on. And I just want to kind of give a little kind of reminder if you listen to that one after you've listened to this one. Remember, all of these things, all these negative things that you're seeing in the context of doom scrolling and constant news feeds and all that, it's all being placed into your brain in a way because it's associated with threat. And threat to your brain is a crisis, kind of life and death kind of stuff. That's what the stress response is. And it's real significant type of things. And so when someone disagrees with you then, and you've kind of had this kind of memory or understanding put into you based on threat, your response is more of a defense kind of thing, over the top. And that's really what drives a lot of that. And we don't understand that. This is all very neuroscience. This is all very, right at the level of neurons and neurotransmitters. And we're thinking it's just, well, I'm right and you're wrong. And really what's happened is you're being driven by an algorithm that focuses on your threat response.
Yeah, it's a behavioral response to your perceived threat in your environment.
So we'll talk about that in an upcoming episode, and I hope you enjoyed this time today. But, I think really at the end of the day, most of our conversations are just about helping you try to become a little bit more aware and really kind of live in the moment and ask yourself, what's healthy for me and what's not healthy for me, particularly from a mental health perspective. And where is God in that? Where's my faith in that? And I think this is an easy one to just step back for a moment and say, I think if you step back, you're going to go, oh, wow, I spent way too much time on that and not in a healthy way. So thanks for joining us today, and I look forward to having you on a future episode.
Thanks for joining our conversation on this episode of the Madness and Grace podcast. If you found value in our discussion today, we'd love it if you'd subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an episode.
And if you enjoyed what you heard, please consider leaving us a rating and review. It helps others find these important conversations.
Sharing this podcast with friends and family members is also a wonderful way to extend hope to those who might be struggling with mental health concerns.
We'll be back next time with another candid conversation about madness and grace. See you then.